President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced an earlier closing time for restaurants. How will this affect the bottom line of the restaurant industry? Wendy Alberts, CEO of Restaurants Association of South Africa, joins us now to talk about this. Wendy, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. How are you this evening?
The President says there has been some negotiation back and forth, I suppose, with municipalities and the various sectors that will be affected. How tough were those negotiations?
Look, it's been a very, very difficult week, and we've been negotiating from provincial governments right through to the national body, and I think that the reflection of the outcome of the President's speech really shows the collaboration that we have with government, the good relationship we have with the Minister of Tourism, and that the negotiations really have put a heartfelt thought behind the restaurant sector, which has really been through a very, very, very traumatic time over the last month. And I think that it really shows an indication that we are looking to work in ways that has the least amount of impact through this very difficult time while we manage lives versus livelihoods.
Yeah. President, impressing upon product owners in particular, those who own restaurants and bars, to ensure that they make sure that their customers abide by the protocols or they face a jail sentence of 6 months. And this surely says there's a lot of responsibility that is being placed on restaurants themselves, who we have heard that some under lockdown level 1 have actually exceeded their 50% capacity.
You know, it's been a challenging time with the protocols from the onset. Clear lines of communication is obviously imperative for us, delivering on the regulations as well as the protocols. And we'll continue to support what is best in order to ensure that there's a resurgence. So for us as the restaurant industry, you know, we've got probably the highest protocols out of anybody who's got from any other industry. We will continue to support those protocols and the directives and ensure that we keep our patrons and our staff as our highest health and safety concern. You know, it's imperative. We can't afford to close our businesses down. The situation is very rough, and we will certainly be ensuring that we match and measure up those standards and ensure that we do not negate on any of those protocols that are in place.
You will now be required to close a bit at 10 p.m., even on Christmas Eve, on New Year's Eve, on Christmas Day, and in all those very important days that generally you would see a lot of feet coming to your restaurants. How do you feel about that, and how will that impact on the sector?
Look, it's definitely going to set a very different tone for this holiday season. The curfew is going to have a massive impact on us. We are going to put in communication back to the President's office tomorrow. It is very complicated for us to be able to manage the amount of people that will be coming into our establishment, as well as doing proper cleaning. So if we close our restaurants by 10 o'clock, it's going to be very difficult to get our businesses clean, sanitized, ready for service for the next day, manage the numbers, manage the limitations, manage the queues and the flow of people, and then still get our staff home and in bed by 11. You know, one of the things that we had called for was a lifting of curfew to support the restaurants through the time, that we could arrange for the various seatings to keep people safe. And I think with there being absolutely no public drinking, it's going to place a lot more demand and a lot more numbers on the restaurants. So we certainly are going to see an increase in people. We don't want people queuing. So we are going to have to address the curfew with the President's office.
Now, Wendy, let's talk then about what the recovery is going to look like. I mean, if you're particularly going to lose a lot of business during this time with the review early in Jan, what is likely now going to be, or when are we likely going to see the recovery of this sector?
You know, we are nowhere near recovery. We are sitting at a fraction of our turnovers. We are operating our businesses at a fraction of capacity. We've got a lot of challenges. I mean, as I've said, we are having complications with the banks that pulled in loans, that pulled in temporary overdraft lending, which puts huge pressure on our businesses to even try and have cash flow to trade us through this holiday season. We're having a very bad marriage. We're in a divorce, trying to have a good relationship with our landlords. They're also taking strain. They're also having it very difficult. They can't get relief on their side. Suppliers have not been very supportive. They've taken judgments and blacklisted many of our establishments. The UIF and the TERS have not been prompt in payouts, and the list just goes on with many other challenges. Running a restaurant is a very, very tricky business. fine lines, very complicated margins, etc., and a lot of preparation that goes into effect to gearing up to holiday season like this. So we have really adequately prepared. It is really wrong of government to have left it to the 11th hour. We should have really been planning for the holiday season, and somebody who is experienced and the expertise and the scientists should have really been tracking for the crowds and the amount of people that would be frequenting destinations over the holiday time. And we should have adequately prepared that it didn't prejudice the restaurants. Yeah. But we're yet again in a position where we are prejudiced. We seem like we're in a fortunate position that we are allowed to trade with on-site alcohol consumption. But really with the number of restrictions and the curfew restrictions and the other issues placed on us, it makes it very complicated. So we've got to manage these challenges. We've got to try and work through the difficult trading days that we've got from the 15th through to early January. And we were really holding out that this would have been our golden ticket to finding some form of financial support in allowing us to recover, to hold us through to January, February, which are complicated months. So we are an island on our own. We have very little support from everybody else in terms of looking at mechanisms to rebuild the industry. Yeah. And financially, we are very frail. So this is really going to have a very massive impact. We've prepared, we've got stock, we've got cash flow, we've trained staff. And I think now with the restrictions that's come in place, again, we're going to have to obviously temporarily retrench a number of staff that we brought in to support the holiday season, as our businesses financially just won't be able to cope with all of it.
But Wendy, looking at the restrictions yet again, I mean, is there any positive that you're taking, for example, from the restrictions being placed on beaches, and whether or not those patrons who would have wanted to be maybe in the sand would want to then maybe opt to be in a restaurant?
You know, we can't say that one person's negativity is another person's pleasure, because it certainly is not working like this. We rely on the entire food chain to support the restaurant sector. So if people go to beaches, they're coming to us for ice creams and milkshakes and a cold beer, etc. The whole holiday experience is part of beaches, restaurants, engagements, family time, celebrations, etc. And there's an interruption. There'll be a definite interruption on those days that we will see that the holidaymaker will change their behavior. It's going to be an interesting holiday season. We're very concerned about the garden route. We need to have communications with our restaurants. We need to ensure that we have the highest level of protocols, that we can safely allow people to enjoy our facilities without putting anybody at risk. You know, what we have learned through the months of COVID is that the restaurant is one of the lower risk areas to do the transmissions. And through all of this time, we certainly have been calling for that evidence to highlight where we are a responsible source for the spreading of COVID. Yeah. So we will play our part responsibly over the holiday season. We will ensure that the health and safety of our staff and our patrons is always our highest priority. And we'll do what we can do, given the circumstances and the restrictive trade, to support government in collaborating as we move through December, January, February, into the next stages of where we go into lockdown, that we certainly don't move into any more complicated spaces that completely decimates our industry.
Wendy Alberts, appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for joining us as the CEO of the Restaurants Association.